Hey guys, I've got an old fuel cell for a Formula Vee, which is sitting right over here, and the foam inside is all bad. So I went online to try to figure out if I could replace the foam, which I can. It's not going to be easy because I don't have any access panels. The bladder is in pretty good shape. It's ancient, but be that as it may, I'm going to put some foam in it and decide if I want to replace it. So I've cleaned out the inside as best I can. Some of the foam is actually still glued to the fabric or whatever this stuff is that makes the bladder. But I thought I'd do a quick video of how I'm gonna refoam it. So I've got a couple things here. One foam block I got from ATL, I think, ordered that from them. And what I've gone and done is try to figure out the basic shape. So I basically lined up my foam block like so, taking into account the thickness. I lined up the front a little bit back to account for the thickness of the bladder, and then I came back here and I made a little line. You can't see it in here, but once I move this away you'll see it. Boop. Taking a right angle triangle, which I have this guy. I drew the line up, drew the line over, then I did the same thing for the width, lined it up, made a mark, made my square. So I had a nice big rectangle here, and I traced it all around. And then I had to make the angle, and to account for this angle here, I grabbed some foam pieces that I had lying around. And I think I only used one thickness when I did it, but the thickness, I've got to account for the thickness of the bottom, but I also have to account for the thickness of the top. And this is just about double the thickness of one of those sides. So then I set the foam block on top, lined it up, and ran my Sharpie right along there. Then where that met at the top, I ran a line straight across again with my right angle, my triangle, whatever you want to call that thing. And now what I'm going to do, and I'll shut this off and do it, and then see how it works, is I found an old knife that we had sitting in the drawer that I don't think we've ever used, and pull the sheath off. That's nice and thin, nice and long. And I'm going to heat it up with my torch and hopefully slice through this pretty painlessly. So I will hop to that and show you what happens. Okay, I'm back. I just want to show you what I've got. I cut the block out following my lines, and a little wavy there, but that's not going to make a big deal. Or not be a big deal. I will say that heating this knife up with the propane torch is a waste of time, but cutting this stuff is actually pretty easy. It's not like a lot of foam rubber that you're used to. It's a little more plasticky, a little firmer. So when you cut it, it's almost crisp. You just kind of saw through it. So what I'm going to do now is I've got a line on this side. I'm going to transfer a line onto this side, the same thing, so that I can make sure that I stay straight on both sides and follow the line. And that'll give me a good block. I'm then going to have to account for this here. This particular fuel bladder is pretty complicated. This part's a little crunchy, but to follow the frame rails. And I've got a bunch of cuts to do, but I think once I can get this in, which will be tough because I've only got this little access hole, I'll get my triangle piece cut, which will be this big block, and I might have to cut it in strips so that I can feed it in here. I'm trying not to have to remove this because these are flathead screws, which everybody knows are awful. And they don't want to come out, so all they're going to do is strip. So we'll see what we get. I'll get to it and show you what I end up with. Okay, I thought I'd chime in here. I've got this angle cut. It's not perfect, but then I've gone ahead and measured out the frame rail cutouts, and I thought I'd jump back on here because my big knife obviously isn't going to fit. I tried my X-Acto, and that'll certainly, if I can show you here, it'll certainly cut down, but you've got to kind of keep slicing. So I'm taking my little X-Acto and heating it up really well with this guy until it kind of looks like it tempers, you know, it gets that little color to it. And then when I put it on here, it just kind of melts right through. So this is really nice. I got to keep heating it up. But for your fine cuts, this is absolutely the way to do it. And lighting the rubber on fire. So, all right, anyway, I'm gonna get back to work. Okay, I'm back. Just wanted to show you what I have here. So, it's starting to follow the shape. And what I noticed was this thing worked fantastic. I had to keep heating. I could probably go about halfway down, then I'd have to reheat and go back down. And the reason I think this knife wasn't working is because it's so big, I couldn't really heat it up to that temperature. You know, this one, even just this far, it had cooled down enough. So it's obviously got to be pretty hot. But if you had maybe a medium-sized knife and really heated that thing up, you could probably do the whole thing very quickly. But like I said, this slices pretty well. So it's a sharp, non-serrated knife. All right, I got to get back to work here because I've got to figure out a few other blocks that are going to go on top of this and figure out how this stuff does not compress very much. I mean, I'm not squeezing tight because I want to make sure I don't crush it, but I don't know if I could crush that up into that hole and then have it expand properly inside there. So I'm probably going to cut it in maybe thirds. So anyway, back to work. All right, quick update there. I just cut this into thirds. It's just a little wider than that, so I should be able to compress that in and hopefully slide each in, line them up, and then do the next blocks. So I'm kind of getting this stuff in here, and I'll just show you a couple things that I've run into. I'm able to shove this down in, compress it, push this thing down in. Manipulating it in here is not easy. I have some forceps, which, you know, these things pinch close, which kind of sucks for doing this. I've actually found that long screwdriver is the easiest way to manipulate it, just pushing it and cramming it until it's in place. It looks like I've got a little room. I don't know if this is going to focus down there in the back. Yeah, well, you can't really see it, but whatever. There's a little space down there, so I've cut some of my extra strips, and I'll push those down in there once I get these in. It's not necessarily easy, but then I realize one thing is when I make my next shape, I've got to figure out where this shape stopped. And the easiest way to do that is going to be to actually mark it on the outside of the tank here. So I've got two pieces in here now. I've got them pretty well positioned. I'm finding using a blunt object to help ram this stuff in is good. I don't want to use the screwdriver because it might put a hole in it. And sorry if it's loud. I've got my brand new little heater going over there. But you need a little room to work. And so I realized getting this last big piece in might be a problem. So what I've done is I've cut it. I didn't really care about the shape because this piece is going to fit right in like a puzzle anyway. So I'm going to shove this piece in, get it situated, and then drop this guy in, and we should be good. Then I can fill in some of the gaps and cut my other pieces. Another tip here, as I was pushing that one in, particularly because it's a weird shape like this one is, once it falls in there, you can't really see what you're doing, so you want to make sure you know where the top is. So, for example, my top is here, so I'm labeling things like top and back. So once I get it in there, I can see what sorry, it's a little tricky to do like this. So once it uncompresses, I can find the right areas and get it positioned. Okay, so I got all them in. Labeling that piece was really helpful because as I squished that in there and tried to manipulate it, which was kind of difficult, it really helped me know where I needed to position it. So I've got it pretty well positioned in there. I mean, I used everything. I used this yard stick here to kind of help get way down in there and push things forward and move them around, but they kind of fell into into place, and we're getting there. I think that was probably the hardest part. So I'm gonna start doing the rest of this, and I'll chime in once. We're right up near the top now. Everything's squared off and pretty and filled. I've got the last piece cut, get this focused. Not that you don't know what a foam cube looks like, but... And my fuel pickup sits right on top here. But we got this little spout here. And this bottom half slides underneath the fuel cell and comes up from the bottom. This part sits on top. So I'm gonna have to separate this with the foam in here. I'm gonna have to be able to slide this over. So I cut a little gouge, roughly lining up here. So when I place this in, I'll be able to slide it over underneath within the fuel cell. So I don't know how well that's gonna work. I'm also not sure yet if I need to leave a little cutout, little divot. So when you're filling the foam, you're not right up to the top here with foam and gases splashing off of it or something. So I'm gonna find that out, and then I'm gonna cut this divot because my guess is I'm supposed to make a little one, and then slide this in, go get a fuel line, and that should be good. I was a little worried at first because of all the junk on the side of the fuel tank here that wouldn't come up. I think what they did was they cut the foam, built this around it, and so some of the resin stuck to the foam, and that's why that's stuck in there. I mean, it won't even scrape off. I was a little concerned about that getting sucked into the engine, but this stuff is essentially a giant fuel filter. So I can't really see this being too much of an issue. I haven't decided if I'm going to leave a fuel filter, not this one, on the bottom there. But I should be able to get a hose down straight from the top here. Let's get this guy down. And it should come all the way down, and I should be able to kind of snake that down between the pieces of foam and get it down to the bottom for fuel pickup. And then I think I'm good. So we'll see. I'll fill it again with fuel, make sure it's still holding fuel, and then it'll go back in the car. So if so, I've saved myself about $1,000. The fuel was, or this foam was about $50. Might have been a little less, a little more. I got enough for, it was 1 cubic yard, I believe it was. So it's enough for 7 to 8 gallons, which is about what this is. And you can see I've got a good chunk left over. So I'm getting there. So I've got all the foam in. Everything's complete. This thing here, straight down from that is a piece of fuel tubing that goes straight down. To get that in there, I basically took that long knife I had, which I actually have put away here, but I heated up just the tip of it and just stuck that straight down in and kept kind of making a star pattern to make sure I could get the pipe in, or the hose in. And you'll see I did leave a little bit of a gap, but very little. So fuel is here. This was just an area that I set up so that I can test how much fuel I have in here. I plan on doing that using a dowel. Paul Fafford told me about that, but basically sticking a dowel down in here, and then when you pull it up, you can decide, figure out how much fuel you'll have on it. So that hole is going to need a little work still, but I haven't bought the dowel yet. So and I'll go ahead and I'll fill this with 1 gallon of fuel, put the dowel in, mark where it is on the dowel, add another gallon up to the 2 gallon mark, put another mark on the dowel, and so forth until I figure out actually how much this holds. So so this project's all done. I cleaned this guy up again, reconditioned the rubber a little bit, and we are all set. So I'm probably going to throw a coating of I think it's a patchwork resin or something on it, but I'll just cover the whole thing just to be safe, and we should be good to go. So that's it. Hope that helped.